Rapidly evolving generative AI use cases demand a level of speed, flexibility, and connectedness that traditional IT platforms just can't handle. Yet everyone wants to leverage the promise that generative AI can make modernization faster, easier, and more affordable. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is top of mind for executives who want their organizations to thrive in this new age. And this is true for leaders with zero or maybe minimal AI experience, those who started the AI journey and are now stuck perhaps, and those ready to scale their AI investments. We believe that the rise of generative AI in the 2020s signifies an inflection point in the history of technology, a development that's on par with the telephone and the internet. Now, historically, businesses that missed these opportunities for innovation and reinvention, well, they risk major disruption, loss of market share, and often, sometimes, even failure. Well, today's show is the part one of a two-part series centered on a fantastic new research paper from Worldwide Technology, a guide for CEOs to accelerate AI excitement and adoption. Now, there are tips offered to get you up to speed and in the right headspace for this discussion. They're worth covering here so that you can get the most out of your time. First one, embrace AI as a necessity. You see, AI is essential, not optional. Stay ahead by adopting AI now without letting fear hinder progress. Number two, leverage AI for competitive edge. So you want to foster collective intelligence and accelerate intellectual property development for competitive advantage. Look for ways to do that. Number three, strategic shift to collective brain power. You want to recognize AI as a transformative force that's beyond digital change or digital transformation. You'll want to harness collective brain power for strategic value creation. Use those around you. Number four, navigate AI transformation. So, approach AI as a process, not just a product. This is the only way to do it successfully. Plan, learn, and collaborate to ensure successful transformation. Overcome resistance by understanding and empathizing to maximize business value. And then number five, which is not actually in the guide, keep watching this right now and go read the guide later, but they do go great together. This is all about helping CEOs and top execs get on board with AI in a practical way. Thorough, but not too heavy. Everything here is drawn from years of real-world AI experience with clients and continued investments within WWT's AI Proving Ground, which you'll find in their Advanced Technology Center. Well, we've got two AI experts with us today. Both participate in authoring this report. From Omaha, Nebraska, we have Brent Collins, AVP with Global Solutions and Architectures.
Understanding, one, what we want to do, but also what's possible today and getting those people aligned.
And from somewhere north of San Francisco, Healdsburg, please welcome Tim Brooks, Managing Director for AI Solution Development at WWT.
The models you're using, particularly in generative AI, are some of the smartest interns you've ever hired. Great education, multilingual, can solve all sorts of problems, great analytical reasoning, but they know nothing about your company.
Well, these are exciting times. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to part one of our two-part series on Worldwide Technology's CEO Guide to Accelerate AI.
WWT presents Research.
Well, gentlemen, welcome to Worldwide Technology Research. It's good to have you with us. So a guide for CEOs. This is really a big topic. Both of you worked hard on this, and I can already tell that we're going to get a lot of valuable nuggets out of this, but let's cover some background. Tim, we'll start with you. How long have you been with Worldwide Technology?
Hey, Rob, thanks. Been with Worldwide for 10 years. I serve as Managing Director of AI Solution Development for Worldwide Services Organization. So that's a group of consultants, data scientists, data engineers, security specialists, and we put together, the solutions for our customers, ranging all the way from strategy right through getting their data organized and handing it off and turning into an AI application.
Okay, so services implies that you spend a lot of time with customers. What kind of things do you and your team get involved in?
So most data is not perfectly preserved or curated, and that's where we get involved. We also get involved in translating the strategy needs that are defined by a CEO or the C-suite or a senior executive into what are the technology dependencies, what are the implications of the solution, how do we best facilitate adoption, how does it go to market. That entire range of what we call the AI product lifecycle is something we can get involved in.
Okay, excellent. So you're already hinting at some of the details I look forward to digging into, but let's get Brent introduced. Brent, you also helped in putting this guide together. What is your background with Worldwide Technology?
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and happy to be here today. So I've been with Worldwide a little over 9 years now in a variety of roles. If you can believe it, I started my career here in virtualization, and then really tend to spend a lot of time gravitate towards emerging technologies like AI, which is why I'm here today. But Tim and I have been teaming up on AI for a little over 2 years now. And I sit on our global solutions team. So you think about Tim and I as partners in crime with AI and data. I spend a little bit more time top of the funnel, if you want to think about it that way, cultivating new conversations, inspiring new dialogue around AI and data. And so probably a little bit better way to describe it is I get ourselves into deep water and Tim helps us get out. So
Well, Jim Kavanaugh, co-founder and chief executive officer for
You bet.
WWT, is also a co-author on this, and he has great insights peppered throughout the guide. And I love this quote for getting us kicked off. Gen AI represents the next landmark opportunity for businesses to sink, swim, or soar. And your job as CEO is to figure out how to harness AI to execute the leap in innovation required to build the next disruptive business model or product. So I'll ask either of you, does this speak to what prompted the creation of this guide?
Rob, our observations, and I'm going to, Brent and I, and others at Worldwide have had, I don't know, thousands of customer conversations about their intentions, their needs, their objectives. And what we found was there's generally a gap in the marketplace between what I would call technologists want to execute and what many CEOs and C-level executives need to have executed. And the translation of that strategy into a series of discrete steps and what needs to be considered in order to successfully adopt artificial intelligence is the reason for creating this document. And I would say it's not just about generative AI, but we've been doing artificial intelligence solutions for customers at Worldwide for the last 10 years. So it's observations based upon all of that learning that we've had organizationally. And we can go as deep as down to the person in the data center, managing data center and workloads and resources, and all the way up to advising CEOs on what are the strategic implications of the things they want to execute. The translation layer of that is what this guide seeks to do, to inform the CEO of all the things that are possible and some of the things that are necessary in order to be successful with artificial intelligence.
Well, I like that. So this guide is your way of filling the gap between what technologists want to execute and what maybe C-level executives need to have executed. A translation layer, I think you called it. A series of discrete steps and considerations that are going to be necessary for successful AI adoption. Well, WWT has been working with AI for many years, certainly longer than the last 12 to 18 months of the hype that we've seen around Gen AI and LLMs. But has that hype changed perhaps how you work with clients? Has it been noticeable?
Yeah, I think what Gen AI has done is it's made it a little less intimidating. When we used to hear about this, 5, 10 years ago, it was a group of data scientists with PhDs that are, putting things together for AI. And I think now it's just more approachable, right? At Tim's point, you can interact with it more in a more human-like fashion.
The accessibility of initially ChatGPT and then now many other large language model providers, both open source and proprietary, have lowered the bar to accessibility of artificial intelligence. They popularized it. You can go back and call it the iPhone moment, right? Where now I had this versatile device that could do many things. That doesn't mean that behind that abstraction of the ease of use, there isn't a whole lot of work and complexity going on. But the difference now between 10 years ago is that 10 years ago, it required many data scientists to painstakingly go through tabular data, largely, sometimes, what we call NoSQL data or unstructured data, in order to create a model and then employ the model and then, adjust it and then have inference kick in and for it to successfully be implemented. That time to value and the complexity has been massively reduced by the adoption of GPT in general. Doesn't mean there's still not a lot of work to do behind the scenes, But generative pre-trained transformers, or GPT, have made that more accessible in more use cases because it now communicates like humans do. And that is through text, voice, words, rather than through code or prompts. That has made a massive difference in adoption and
Well,
interest.
that was one of the things I was going to ask you. I mean, is it a good thing? Has it
Yeah,
helped you?
tremendously in that we are now, instead of having I would call it a priesthood of people that understood how to use it and then explained it to others. We can now all use it ourselves. It's democratized it for many people. Now, it's democratized it as well for many, I'd call, bad intentions and bad actors, but it has democratized it. And I think the proper use of it helps make
Sure.
all of us
Yeah.
a little smarter and a little, more productive.
So you mentioned the iPhone moment, which I'm sure everyone understands the reference because it was very pivotal for me. So I assume it was for many others. But this is really a big moment, perhaps on par with the telephone itself. I mean, how would you guys characterize it?
Yeah, I think it's a huge step change personally. I think this is on par with, and I think you brought up the telephone, but I think if we look at major paradigm shifts, if you will, over time, I think this is the next big one personally. I think if we look at, the advent of the internet where you start to give, a lot more access to information across the globe, this is providing, if I can, intelligence. It's the intelligence revolution, if you will, versus the information age. So I do think that there's certain aspects of AI that are getting overhyped, just like anything. And I think for us, it's bringing some sanity to that a little bit. As Tim said it earlier, which is we can help direct attention and focus into the areas where we think there's the strongest return on investment or return on innovation, if you will. And I think that's really where we're finding some value for clients. Is there's so much out there, is really where do you focus to move the fastest. But I do think this is the start. And one of the things that Tim says all the time that I really like is this is the worst AI that you're ever going to encounter. And I think that's absolutely where we're at, which is, AI is super powerful right now, but it's only going to get better as we move forward.
Some have called it the fourth, industrial revolution or an information revolution. If we go back and we look at those, the first would be electricity. And electricity is a general purpose technology now, but it was sort of a novelty when it first began, and it was somewhat dangerous. And there were multiple carriers putting electricity into someone's home. I mean, you might have 6 wires from local electricity providers if you lived in Boston or New York 150 years ago. Eventually that matured and use cases for electricity, prevailed. So the use cases, just radio, television, air conditioning, all of these provided us with major socioeconomic, changes. And I think looking back, most of us would say those were advantageous changes. In a narrow context locally, if you were, someone who was in the business of doing oil lamps to light the streets of New York or Boston, that might entail job loss. But I'd say for most of us, it entailed, electricity and the light bulb, as you mentioned, Rob, at night. The next one might be, let's take the information age and the age of computing, right? And that started back in the 50s when computers were massive, and it was like, okay, what are we going to do with these things? And we have a space program, we have all sorts of complementary, advantageous innovations came about from it. Let's look at mobility. No one at Apple who was in the business of computing in the early 80s anticipated that there would one day be a thing called a phone, or then, now an iPhone, that would be used only a sliver of the time for actually making a call. It's used for various apps. And we're facing that sort of moment now with artificial intelligence.
Well, I like your points on democratization. I think this is what makes AI, such a unique opportunity. I mean, previous waves of technology have reshaped human civilization, but it feels like AI is really unique in terms of unleashing new powers and transforming existing power dynamics. Now, most of our big pivots in history were initially limited to, say, rich people, big companies, or maybe nation states. AI is increasingly accessible and powerful but now individuals are doing these things that were once computationally impossible or maybe financially prohibitive. So this democratization of AI really is a shift from, say, what we've seen with internet or cloud, where there's a focus on action and execution, and it's at such a rapid pace.
Brent mentioned, one of the things I say is it's the worst AI you're ever going to use. It's the most limited artificial intelligence that you're using is today. It's only getting better, and it's getting better very rapidly. It's actually accelerating in growth at a pace far beyond the other three revolutions I just mentioned. So if you're a CEO, do you get ahead of this? Do you react to it? Are you trying to catch up? How do you channel this to your organization's strategic advantage? And that's what we try to spell out in the guide.
Well, what a great setup. AI is a broad term covering different applications and technologies, everything from machine learning through natural language processing, computer vision, speech recognition, Gen AI, deep learning, digital twins, and just a whole bunch more. The possibilities are exciting, but they're also challenging, especially for executives, I think, to figure out where to start. Perhaps it would be helpful to talk through some use cases, ways to perhaps narrow down the options.
We kind of look at things sometimes in our industry as a technology problem, but there's a lot of people and process and just, it's an idea thing. With AI, it's so awesome that you can come in and whether you're a CEO, a line of business owner, a data scientist, or even a technologist, there's use cases in every one of those people's heads that they say, hey, AI would be great at this. So when I think about use cases, I think about it in terms of what's going to make everybody's lives easier. How do we take a technology that might be really complicated but make it really easy? So the best AI to me is the AI that you don't even know you're using. So we're using AI every day. When I type in a message in iMessage, the next word's coming up. That's predictive AI. If I'm shopping for a pair of pants and it says, hey, we really recommend this shirt, same thing, right? There's AI in the background that I don't even know I'm using. It's just coming in naturally with what I'm doing. So when we think about use cases, whether it's a CEO going, hey, this might make my life easier as a CEO, or it could be, I want to make employees more efficient. I want to, develop a new relationship with my customers. There's all sorts of use cases. So when we come in and really talk about this with customers, it could be, if I'm in global finance, I might have an investment advisor. How do I equip that person to develop a model portfolio easier for my client? It could be in healthcare. If I'm a radiologist, can I develop a chat interface with that radiologist that allows me to, take a look, is there a break in here? So I'm using classification AI to do that. And then maybe make a recommendation for treatment or a prognosis for that patient. That's all AI, but it's coming in through an interface that they may not even realize, all the power of AI behind that. So for us, everything's a use case almost. So we kind of come into it and we look at it through the lens of, how complicated is the use case? What's the return on investment for that client? And then how good is the data that's going to inform that use case? So for me, the whole world is a playground for AI. It's just a matter of, how do I apply it in the best way possible and in a way that a typical user can actually, take advantage of it without having to figure out the complications behind it.
Do you think there's been an over-rotation towards Gen AI or LLMs perhaps? Does it run the risk of diverting or even generating more misunderstanding around really important AI-centered initiatives?
Even though Gen AI is very much more approachable, there are still a ton of use cases behind that in more applied or traditional AI that customers can take advantage of. I think when I look at it, Gen AI is getting all the headlines, but there's all this work that needs to be done in the background that can really help a customer with really strong return on investment, whether it's applied AI or just simple data analytics and just getting my data in order. So it's really, opened up this world for if I'm looking at a CEO or another senior executive or anybody in the organization to look at my data. How do I unlock the value of that data? And it could be traditional data analytics. It could just be traditional or applied AI, or it could be, the Gen AI that we're all using right now.
Yeah. How do we unlock the value of this data? We always drop ROI terminology throughout these discussions, but I wonder if this change is big enough to warrant a little more consideration around the success metrics that we do choose to kind of lean on. Is ROI or is return on investment a useful metric here?
Yes, that's an important way to view it. There's also another, let's call it a 3 to 5, maybe even certainly by 10-year window on strategy, and CEOs and boards are generally concerned with, a farther ahead strategic horizon than just their quarterly results, right? But let's look at it in terms of how organizations make decisions. Often there are silos of knowledge, and there's not a lot of sharing across the organization. If we think of artificial intelligence as most simply software that learns on its own and retains that knowledge, we now have the ability to capture the intelligence of the organization, the best practices. Something that Brent may be particularly skilled in is now embedded in the DNA of the organization. And someone new to the organization just being onboarded, or someone who needs to retrieve that little bit of information to help them make a critical decision, now has access to that. As opposed to, is Brent still with us? Is he on holiday? Can I access what he did, many years before? I don't know. So that part of it is really important. So if we want our organizations to make decisions faster and make better decisions and be smarter, then artificial intelligence is a way to encode that collective intelligence into your DNA and make it more accessible. So that's sort of a longer term horizon. That's what you're iterating toward. But every CEO and most senior executives I've spoken to, they want that. They want to have a smarter organization. They want to give their employees who they've hired and trust access to information to do their jobs more productively. And I think that's a great goal to keep in mind at a senior executive level. Foundationally, what artificial intelligence can do for executives is provide greater access to the information they need to make the decisions to guide their organization. So, if nothing else, in addition to the specific use cases where all types of artificial intelligence can be used, machine learning, computer vision, recommendation engines, all sorts of that, as well as generative AI, I do think that for executives making critical decisions, access to artificial intelligence augments their decision making. And rather than have a fire drill and everybody go find out this new thing that's going to impact us, it might lead to greater efficiencies and a more thorough analysis to use an ongoing artificial intelligence agent of some type in order to gather and synthesize that information. That's being used already across VCs, across some private equity firms, across a lot of other major organizations.
So the use cases are broad and they stretch across every part of the company. I mean, AI is hitting on so many areas. This feels like a revolution, but we can't call in sick for it. What it does mean is there are many things that have to be done regardless of any specific direction. So in the broadest sense, this spells a need for organization-wide transformation, does it not?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that we look at in technology, which is what is this going to shift or change? And there's a level to that, which is when we look at AI, and it's we hear a lot about it being a company change for different technologies. AI is an industry shift, and it's going to be a company shift. So you don't want to be Blockbuster, right? And looking at this thing through the lens of, this might be a fad, or I might go here. The ROI might not be super clear, but this is a company impacting event.
Another bit that I think is attributed to Jim Kavanaugh, adopting AI at the enterprise level isn't simply a matter of procuring and integrating the latest AI technologies. As we dig into how leaders can execute here, and your guide suggests viewing AI adoption through the lens of organizational transformation, stating first, you need to look at it as a framing device, highlighting AI's potential to unlock entirely new business models and strategies, not simply improving on the existing ones. And then second, that the broad scope here is intentional because AI can deliver results that surpass, say, simple task automation and provide true alignment to the human talent of your workforce. So characterizing the opportunity of AI as an organizational fresh start can help kickstart many things: process improvements, brand evolution, complex problem solving, and a whole lot more. Tim, let me ask you, is this represent a good time for a fresh start?
You should absolutely take advantage of it. I think the marketplace is also telling us that, right? If you look at the adoption, the demand for artificial intelligence, there's more substance there. There's hype for sure, but there's a tremendous amount of substance, and companies are realizing real results from their AI applications and their AI endeavors.
Some of it is just basic education. Like, this isn't something to be feared. It's something to be, you got to take a look at it for what it is, how it can help you. I think once you do that, and then you start bringing people into that process, what do you think? How could this help you? And all of a sudden you have a lot more energy created in your organization to go do that. So for us, it's a little bit of education. It's also, you have to shift the way that you think about your organization, because to Tim's point earlier, this is going to fundamentally change the way that organizations work. You're going to be faster with decision making. You're going to have access to, concrete data that's going to inform that decision making. And you're going to be able to apply it to everything. I mean, whether it's a digital assistant for me to do research, it might be optimizing your supply chain. It could be a new way to interface with your customers. So your customers come in, and instead of that really rudimentary, terrible chatbot experience that we had 5 years ago, all of a sudden maybe we're going to build in a few different things where it's going to be exploring different opportunities for you to not only interact with your customer, but also that customer to interact with your business. It could be, I need an executive that's responsible for AI because this impacts my entire business. I need a point at which those things intersect and somebody to make decisions on that. I need to interface with all my lines of business to say, how could this impact, your line of business? How can this, make you more efficient? How can this, potentially increase revenue for you or improve that customer experience? So you engage those folks. You also have a legal and risk component to this, where you have to start bringing in your law people and your risk people to say, is all of this going to be good, or do I need to control aspects of this so that I don't run into trouble there? And then last but not least is the technologists, and there's others as well, but everything that we're doing in the organization is going to be different. So you have to look at it through that, people process redesign from the CEO all the way down into the technology folks.
Yeah. Okay. So it is big. We've certainly established that. And you mentioned education, which is a whole section of its own worth consulting in the guide. And I'm pulling this straight out of the guide. Given the stakes and the need to treat the journey to AI as a paradigmatic organizational shift rather than another one-off technology investment, executives must educate themselves about the many risks and benefits of AI, both in the near and the long term, before investing in discrete AI solutions. Well, obviously, if you're watching this, you're doing part of that now, but there are a growing number of technical learning paths available for AI data scientists, application developers, as well as CEOs, CDOs, and CIOs. Now, many of these programs are available online and offer courses on topics such as machine learning and deep learning. But look for the links below the video right here to see what kind of education WWT may have added, because they're always adding more. And I encourage you to watch out for dedicated AI learning paths, which are currently in development, I guess, depending on when you watch this. Now, Brent also mentioned the importance of an executive responsible for AI. I know your report calls for an executive sponsor. Can you explain?
So we're fortunate in that the executive sponsor is Jim Kavanaugh, our CEO, and there's no one more energized about it for quite a while now than Jim. And this is taken on the entire leadership team at Worldwide, and we're AI forward. We're embracing it. We're embracing it intelligently. We're embracing it mindful of risks, but we're embracing it and learning as an organization. We trained just inside of Worldwide within a matter of months more than 2,000 employees in the proper uses of artificial intelligence, how to embed it into your own or into our organization, how to use it in their jobs. And we have actively developed our own in-house artificial intelligence solutions. I don't think we would have been able to move as fast as we have in the last less than a year without CEO sponsorship. And for other organizations, even if it's not the CEO, generally speaking, if they're going to be successful, the word chief is typically in their title in order to get this done.
I would argue that AI is so fundamentally different and going to fundamentally change every business. It's going to require not just a chief in the title. I think the chief executive needs to be personally involved and pushing the various other parts of the organization forward to think about, how could this change? How can this be foundationally different for my company? If they're not doing that, somebody else is in the competitive environment. And I don't want to inspire through fear. It's never been my way. I think there's a huge opportunity here for every business to move faster with less expense, to innovate better, to work with their customers in a much more compelling fashion. It's going to fundamentally change the way that businesses operate, whether you're finance, whether you're healthcare, insurance, doesn't matter. There's just so much opportunity here to change the way businesses do things.
Well, in addition to the executive sponsor, there's a recommendation to establish an AI Center of Excellence.
I met with a manufacturer the other day that's in food products, and they called it the AI kitchen, by the way. But it's really a place where all of the organization, if it's going to impact the entire organization, you need the entire organization making those decisions. So it could be one center of excellence, or I've seen where people put together a center of excellence for the organization as a whole. And then they have another, we'll call it a center of excellence, but it's more technical in nature, which is, people exploring the technology, innovating with the technology, and kind of tinkering and figuring things out. So I like that idea because you have the people, process, organizational side of it. And then you have the technology side of it that's going to enable the things that line of businesses want to do.
Well, let's say that I'm watching this. I now agree. This is a market. I want to take advantage of it. You don't have to keep convincing me of it. Well, section 3 of the guide is where you speak to the planning process. And I get the question about how CEOs can assess their organization's readiness for AI.
The data side is super, super important. I think AI gets all the headlines, by the way. And I'm a guy from Nebraska. So for me, I have a heart for offensive linemen that don't get their credit. And I think data is the offensive line of AI. And it's so foundational to everything that you do. If you don't protect your quarterback, if you don't open up holes for your running backs, that's the data in an organization. So it's, where is my data? Is it in a format that can be easily consumed? Is it secure? Is it governed properly? Do the right people have access? All of this comes into the data side of it. So when I kind of look through that lens, it's, where do I want to go and why, and start to prioritize use cases. You also, when we started going through this process, we came up with about 80 use cases, and then we started to rationalize it across, return on investment, or to Tim's point, is this helping us innovate faster, democratizing data, harder to do a return on investment, but super critical to your organization. And then we looked at things like how complicated would this be, or complex is this to produce? And then how good is the data? So all of those factors kind of produce your priority around the use cases. And I think you can move faster when you do that.
This is one of the more overwhelming subjects for organizations. Is they have a proliferation of use cases, all good, many of which have bubbled up from the line of business, executives and users and people that have got brilliant ideas. And these all now compete for resources and attention from a CEO. And so then the question is, how do we go about deciding which of these not to do? Let's just say that they were all great ideas that came up from our organization.
Sometimes that's a great way to start. Right? I love that.
How do we decide which of these not to do? And you want to have some objective criteria about that. So it's not just, well, this was one of my favorite teams over in HR or in marketing, so let's do that. You want some objectivity about it. And Brent touched on a lot of the real important aspects of that. Another would be, what's the competitor threat of this if we don't do it and my competition does it, right? That's another way to look at it.
Okay, that's it for part 1. We're going to cover the rest of the conversation in part 2, which has a whole bunch more, getting a little bit more technical, build versus buy. Some very big considerations there, lots of nuance, as well as security, which has a lot of nuance, and how that translates to trust, some regulatory challenges, and kind of what's happening and where to watch for more of that, plus a great summary for both parts 1 and 2 within 8 pitfalls to avoid. 9th pitfall being, of course, don't miss this list.
This episode is brought to you by Vertiv. Vertiv brings together hardware, software, analytics, and services to help your vital applications run continuously, perform optimally, and grow with your business needs.